It was the tail end of a blistering June when I first saw her, half shadow, half ghost, stumbling down the arroyo like she'd crawled out of the very bones of the desert. I'd been working a broken fence line, sweating through my shirt, when my mule kicked up its ears and gave a low snort. That's when I saw her, barefoot, bruised, and bleeding, two mangy dogs trailing her like spirits out of a Bible tale. I don't get many visitors on my spread. Most folks ride wide around the Ridley place these days. Maybe it's the land, dry and bitter, always wanting more than it gives, or maybe it's me. I stopped caring much which a long while back. Ever since Mary passed, it's been just me and the wind. But this girl, this woman, she wasn't someone you could ignore. She staggered through the fence gap like a sleepwalker, didn't even flinch when a splintered post snagged her skirt. I dropped my tools, wiped my hands on my jeans, and stepped forward slow, like approaching a wild thing too hurt to run. She looked up at me with eyes like black river stones, wide, empty, and watching. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Dust and blood caked her cheeks, and a welt ran from her temple to her jaw. The dogs, one limping, one near collapse, circled once and dropped at her feet. I raised both palms, careful not to spook her. "Miss, you all right?" She swayed. "I ain't gonna hurt you." Then she crumpled, right there in the dirt, just folded like a sack of laundry and went still. She didn't wake for hours. I carried her inside, laid her on Mary's old bed. Hadn't let anyone in that room since the day I buried her. But I couldn't well leave the girl on the floor. I washed her cuts, wrapped her ankle, left water by the bed. The dogs, half-dead hounds really, curled up just outside the door, like they knew better than to test my patience. I didn't sleep that night. Sat by the stove, oil lamp guttering, watching shadows crawl across the walls while the wind whispered things through the cracks in the boards. Her face stayed in my mind, something in the way she looked at me, like I was the last thing she'd ever see, like she expected I'd raise a hand next. She finally stirred near dawn. I heard the floorboard creak and stood, slow again, so I didn't startle her. "You're safe," I said before she even saw me. She froze in the doorway. Her shirt hung loose on one shoulder where I'd had to cut it to bandage her side. Her hair was matted, lips cracked. "You're in my home," I said gently. "Name's Bo Ridley. You needn't be afraid." She looked at the dogs, then back at me. "They didn't follow me. I brought them. You can keep them," I said. "They seem loyal." "They try to tear my dress to shreds," she muttered, voice hoarse. "Then they turned on the ones who set him loose." I said nothing. "Can I sit?" she asked, eyeing the chair by the stove. I nodded. She lowered herself into it like an old woman. I poured her a tin cup of water and handed it over. She drank in slow gulps, wincing as she swallowed. "Name?" I asked. She didn't answer right off. Stared into the tin like it held something holy. "Clara," she said finally. "Clara Harrow." That name landed in my chest like a thrown stone. I knew it, knew the town it came from, too. Red Hollow was 30 miles east, a God-fearing little dust bowl with too many churches and not enough mercy. "Mary?" I asked, more out of habit than need. She nodded once. "Not anymore." "What happened?" She looked at me then, really looked. Not like a frightened doe, but like someone weighing what a man's soul might be worth. Her gaze was dry and hard. "I got cast out," she said. I didn't press. That was enough for now. "I got coffee," I offered. "And jerky, if your stomach can manage." She gave the faintest smile, and it cracked her lip. "I'd like that." Later, she helped me mend a pan behind the barn. She moved slow, favoring the ankle, but insisted. Said she wasn't dead yet. The dogs followed her everywhere, one with a scar across its eye. She called them Bristle and Tuck. They answered like they'd been hers forever. We didn't talk much more that day, but something passed between us in the quiet. A kind of understanding, maybe. I'd seen what cruelty looked like behind a holy face. My Mary died because a doctor in Red Hollow wouldn't come out during a thunderstorm. Told me we weren't part of the congregation. Said the Lord protected his own. That night, I set Clara up in the guest room. She didn't ask why I wouldn't let her stay in Mary's. She was smart enough not to. I went out to the porch, lit my pipe, and watched the moon rise like a tired lantern over the buttes. Heard her whimpering once through the wall. Dreams chasing her, no doubt. Then a whisper, just a scrap of a word from her room. Stones. It stopped me cold. Just that one word, heavy as judgment. I didn't sleep again that night. Whatever Clara Harrow had run from, it wasn't just dust and dogs. It was men with righteous tongues and fists full of scripture. 2 days passed before Clara spoke more than a few words strung together. She worked beside me with a quiet steadiness, never idle, never in the way. There was something haunted in her movements, measured, as if waiting for the next blow, the next bark command. I never gave her one. I wouldn't. On the third evening, we sat beneath the eaves, watching the sky turn the color of bruised peaches. Bristle and Tuck snore by her boots. I handed her a cup of strong coffee, laced with a touch of molasses. She accepted it like it might burn her fingers. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, she said suddenly, without looking at me. To what? To stone floors, oil lamps, cold sermons. She paused. The Harrow house. She'd never told me she was that Harrow. I'd suspected, sure, but hearing it from her lips gave the name weight. Josiah Harrow wasn't just the deacon of Red Hollow. He was Red Hollow, wealthy, stern, a man of strict godliness and no mercy. I met him once, years ago, when Mary and I went to town for supplies. He'd looked at her, young and swelling with child, like she was a walking sin. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. He was old enough to be my father, Clara said, sipping. But he needed a wife to complete his witness. That's how he said it. Witness. Like marriage was a courtroom, and I was exhibit. You didn't love him, I said, not asking. I barely knew him. She chuckled bitterly. He bought my family's debt. Called it grace. My mother wept with gratitude. I signed a ledger and woke up a wife. I felt a coldness crawl into my chest. That sort of arrangement wasn't unheard of in these parts, but it was rarely called what it was. I try to be dutiful, she said. Sat straight in church, stitched pillowcases, smiled when spoken to. But I wasn't what he wanted. What did he want? A mirror, she said. Something to reflect back his virtue. She ran a hand through her hair, now clean but still tangled from desert wind. There was a boy, Isaac Brandt, Reverend's son, younger than me by a year but smart, kind. He'd come by sometimes to help with deliveries. One day, I told him I missed music. Real music. The next morning, he left a fiddle on the porch. She smiled faint. It wasn't even tuned. That smile vanished. Josiah saw it. Accused me before the sun went down. Didn't even ask. I didn't interrupt. Her voice was steady now, cold and clear as stream water. The Reverend called a gathering. Said I'd tempted his son into lust. Said a woman's silence was proof enough if she had sin in her heart. She blinked slow. They made me stand in the churchyard while they read verses aloud. One after another. All about women and punishment and obedience. And then they set the dogs loose. She didn't cry. Not once. I ran. They shouted that I'd confessed by fleeing. That I was a harlot. That I'd taken the devil into my bed. Her fingers gripped the cup so tight I feared it might shatter. But the dogs didn't bite me. Not bad. One turned on Reverend Brandt when he raised his walking stick. That was Bristle. I looked at the dog now sprawled in the dust like he hadn't ever known violence. You think they'll come after you? I asked. She nodded. They'll come after you first. I exhaled slow. Let them try. That earned me a glance. Not gratitude, surprise. They came for my wife too, in a way, I said, voice gravel thick. Not with dogs. With silence. Clara tilted her head. Mary went into labor during a storm. Nearest doctor was in Red Hollow. I rode Dam near Blind to get him. He asked if we'd joined his congregation. I said no, but we'd be thankful. He said he didn't answer calls from strangers. Said the Lord would decide. What happened? She bled out before dawn. Neither of us spoke for a while. The stars began to poke holes in the dusk. They think they own God, I said finally. That they can twist his name into rope. They own the law in Red Hollow. Josiah sits on the town council. The sheriff's his cousin. I spat into the dust. Then the law's crooked. That won't stop them. I know. We sat a little longer. Then I saw her stiffen. I followed her gaze eastward toward the ridge. Just visible between the silhouettes of mesquite and stone was a thin pillar of smoke. Not campfire smoke. Clean. Controlled. They're riding she whispered. I stood, heart thudding. Smoke meant a signal, a warning, or a gathering. I can leave, Clara said, already rising. No, they'll burn your ranch. They'll burn it whether you're here or not. Better I choose what's worth protecting. She looked at me then, not like a wounded stray, but something older, something that had been through fire and was deciding what to make of the ashes. I picked up my rifle. The night had turned quiet in that dangerous way. No crickets, no wind, just breath and heartbeat. We got till morning, I reckon, I said. Clara looked at Bristle and Tuck, then back at me. Then let's make it count. By the time the sun breached the ridgeline, the ranch was quiet, every door latched, and every window braced with planks cut rough. Clara had filled the canteens and packed bread and jerky into sacks, her hands moving with calm precision. She didn't ask what the plan was, because she already knew there wasn't one. Not a real one. Not when men ride in with righteousness and fire on their side. I'd moved the mule and the dogs into the storm cellar, more for Clara's peace of mind than their safety. Bristle growled when I closed the door, but he didn't bark. He knew the scent of danger same as I did. I sat on the porch with my rifle balanced across my lap. The same sharps I carried in the war, long before I knew what it meant to lose something that didn't carry a gun. My shoulders still ached from the wound I took at Tullahoma, but the ache reminded me I was still breathing, still able. Clara came out just before the dust rose on the horizon. She wore her hair tied back, a scarf wrapped around her neck to keep the sun off. She didn't flinch at the sight of the riders, not even when the glint of iron caught the light. 5 of them, all mounted. One wore a preacher's collar. Another, a brown vest with the silver badge of a deputy pinned crooked to his chest. But I knew better than to expect justice from the likes of him. Stay behind me, I said. Clara stepped to my left, silent. Her hands were empty, but her eyes were steady. The riders stopped just shy of the corral. The man in front dismounted first, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, with a Bible tucked under one arm, like it belonged to him more than it ever did to the rest of us. Reverend Brandt. I recognized him even before he opened his mouth. Mr. Ridley, he said, voice rich as molasses and twice as thick. You've taken in a woman bound to another man. She's not livestock, I said, and she's not bound to anything but her own breath. The deputy shifted in his saddle. One of the other men, older, red-faced, fingers twitching near the butt of his pistol, spat into the dirt. She's a fugitive, Brandt continued, accused of adultery, disobedience, theft. Clara didn't blink. The fiddle. Brandt's jaw tightened. You abandoned your covenant. I was cast out. You ran. I survived. The Reverend turned his gaze on me again. This is your last warning. Hand her over, and we'll leave peaceably. I rose slowly, rifle in hand, but not raised. You don't know much about peace, Reverend, or warning. Don't test us. I took one step off the porch. You came with guns, not prayers. You're not here for justice. You're here to make sure no one sees your shame. Well, here I am, and I see it just fine. The moment cracked like dry timber. The deputy reached for his sidearm, but I was faster. My rifle kicked once, sharp, hard, and he dropped from his saddle like a sack of flour. His pistol clattered on the stones. The horse bolted. The next few seconds passed in a blur of gunfire and shouting. Clara ducked behind the porch rail as bullets tore through the posts. I took cover by the doorway, loading and firing with the grim rhythm I'd learned 2 decades back. One rider went down, screaming, clutching his thigh. Another turned tail and galloped off without firing a shot. Then silence. Brandt stood alone now, breathing hard, revolver in hand. The preacher's collar was askew, his boots dusted with blood, not his own. You're bleeding, Clara said from behind the porch. I looked down and saw the dark stain spreading across my shirt. I hadn't felt it yet. That would come later. Brandt took one step forward. Don't, I warned. You've lost, he said. The law will come. You brought the law, I said, nodding toward the fallen deputy. He died on a lie. Brandt's mouth twitched. He glanced at Clara. You're a marked woman. I was, she said. Not anymore. I raised the rifle one last time and aimed it dead at his chest. Ride back to your church, Reverend, and pray whatever God you believe in is listening. He didn't speak again, just turned, mounted his horse, and rode east without looking back. Clara stitched my side while I bit down on a leather strap. Her hands were steady, voice quiet, as she murmured whatever him came to mind. I didn't ask where she learned to sew flesh. Some things don't need asking. The dogs came out of the cellar at dusk, tails low but eyes bright. Bristle sat at Clara's feet like a sentry. Tuck licked my boot and curled beneath the steps. "You're going to scar," she said. "I've earned worse." She sat beside me on the porch, the last light painting her face gold and soft. She didn't look like a fugitive anymore, just tired. "Free. What now?" she asked. I lit my pipe with shaking fingers. "We patched the fence. Fix the boards. Keep breathing." She smiled, and it was the first true smile I'd seen from her. Red Hollow never came again. Maybe they figured God would handle us. Or maybe they saw the truth in Clara's eyes and turned their backs on the lies they'd lived by. Either way, we stayed. Some folks say the desert eats what it can't break, that it doesn't forgive. But I say it gave me Clara Harrow, and I'd walk through fire again for that. Summer passed into the soft crackle of fall, and Clara stayed. She never said it outright, and I never asked. Some understandings don't need to be spoken. She kept the porch swept, tended the hens, learned which fence lines needed mending and which ones could wait. She moved through the house, like someone trying not to leave footprints, but slowly, day by day, her presence became a kind of gravity. I noticed when she wasn't nearby, like a man notices silence after the wind dies. The wound in my side mended slow, and I took to walking the grounds with a cane, more for show than need. Clara insisted I rest, but I'd never been good at stillness. Not since Mary. So I worked in bits, and she worked in between, and the dogs kept guard like they knew we'd bled for this quiet. We didn't speak of Red Hollow. Not directly, but it hovered like smoke, always there if you turned your head just right. I'd catch Clara staring off sometimes, eyes fixed on the hills like she was measuring the distance between now and then. One morning, she found an old fiddle in the attic, half splintered, strings rusted through. She brought it down like it was a relic, dusted it off, and spent hours tightening what could still hold. That evening, I came in from the barn to find her coaxing a trembling tune from it, about dragging slow over what few strings still sang. It wasn't pretty, but it was music. "You ever learn properly?" I asked. "No," she said, smiling. "Just listen. Still, sounds like something worth keeping." She looked up at me, face lit by the firelight, and for the first time, she didn't seem like a woman who'd fled anything. She looked like someone who'd chosen where to stand. That night, we shared stew and silence, and afterward she read aloud from one of Mary's books. Wuthering Heights, I think, though she skipped the flowery parts. Her voice was clear, low, and easy to listen to. I watched her more than I listened to the story. Sometime past midnight, after she'd gone to bed, I stepped out onto the porch and leaned against the rail. The wind had changed, cooler now, brushing down from the north like a warning. I lit my pipe, drew deep, and stared out into the dark. Part of me still expected hoofbeats. Riders. Another fight. But they never came. The quiet held. Weeks slipped by. I fixed the well pump. Clara traded preserves with the Thompson widow 3 miles west. She came back with a jar of honey and news. Red Hollow had a new deacon. Josiah Harrow was ill. Bedridden. Not dead, not yet, but fading fast. I waited for her to speak on it. She didn't. That night, she burned her marriage papers in the stove. By November, the ranch looked better than it had in years. Fences stood straight. The barn roof no longer leaked. Even the hens laid more regular, as if they knew peace when they felt it. One morning, Clara came into the kitchen with a letter, postmarked from Red Hollow. "You open it?" I asked. She shook her head. Didn't want to do it alone. I took my coffee slow. She handed it over without ceremony. Just a folded piece of paper in an envelope smudged with dust and fingerprints. I read it once, then again. "Josiah passed," I said quietly. "Left everything to the church. But there's more." Clara waited, still as stone. "He named you," I said. "Said he wronged you. Publicly. The new deacon wrote to say they're holding a service. Asking you to attend." So it was what Josiah asked for before the end. She didn't take the letter back. Just stood there, hand at her sides. "You don't have to go." I said. I know. We sat in silence. She looked out the window, where frost had kissed the edges of the prairie. Bristle chased something in the distance, maybe a hare, maybe the wind. Finally, she said, "If I go, it's not to forgive him. No, it's to show them I'm still here, that I'm not afraid. That's reason enough." We left at dawn 2 days later. Rode double on the mule, no hurry in our pace. The land opened before us like a memory, long and dry and sunlit. Red Hollow hadn't changed much. Same crooked steeple, same 2 dusty stores and 1 saloon, pretending it was something holier. But the faces turned slower as we passed. Some recognized Clara, some just sensed a story walking through town. At the church, the new deacon greeted her with practiced sorrow. We stayed in the back. No seats, no hymns, just the sound of a man's name being spoken softer than he deserved. Afterward, Clara stood before the altar and lit a single candle. She didn't pray, didn't cry. She just stood there, long enough for everyone to see. Then we left. We were halfway home when she finally spoke. "It's over." I nodded. "It is." But I knew what she meant. Not just Josiah, not the town, the grip of it, the weight that had been on her back since the day she first signed her name beside his. She looked at me then, and it was different. Not a glance, not a question. It was an answer, one that didn't need words. I reached for her hand. She let me. And when we got back to the ranch, we didn't talk about leaving, or running, or surviving. We just stayed.